let's just skip all that stuff. I hit the wrong button and restarted it. So.
Oh, okay.
It's going to be one of those days, I think. How are you doing, Kirk?
I am doing fine, and I'm assuming we're live now.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, it looks like there's a clock ticking. Although we lost all of our viewers during that intro. I am doing reasonably well, and I haven't even bothered to get outside and dig out after last night's snow dump because we're still getting more.
You got a fresh one?
Yeah, more of the same as we speak. So no use. My lane is 140 yards long, so no use clearing that if it's just going to fill in a couple of hours.
Oh, that's not fun. The sky dandruff is it's pretty to look at on a mountain when you're trying to ski or something, but when it's affecting lives.
Well, I actually like the snow, but there reaches a point. I think we've got more snow this year than I can remember in at least 20 years. Mm-hmm. At least it just keeps coming.
We're not experiencing snow right now, but we're experiencing the temperatures where snow really thrives.
Yeah.
So we're not in any danger of anything melting here.
Yeah.
We're gonna have to start measuring in like Kelvin.
Yeah. 0 degrees Kelvin. That's really cold. It hardly ever gets that cold in Canada, but close to it.
Yeah, it was minus 38 with the wind chill this morning, which like honestly we've had worse, but we're in like week 2 or 3 of this now, and we got another week I think to go. And, it's not enjoyable. No,
but I just got back from giving some seminars in Hawaii, and so I'm, I've had a break at least.
The 40-50 degree difference is a joy to experience.
Yeah, just a week ago I had to worry about getting sunburned.
Here we have the sunburn problem with the sun hitting the snow and blinding you on the way up.
Yeah, snow blindness. Yeah, that can be a thing.
Yep.
With sunglasses.
Yeah, it's that time of year. So how was the trip to Hawaii? Did you talked a lot?
12 seminars, 1 hour each, and I would give them 3 hours at a stretch, like 3 seminars in a row. So it's quite a marathon. I mean, by the end of the 3rd hour, I was ready for a coffee for sure.
You didn't have a picture up on your desk there that was ready to go?
Just a water bottle. Yeah, just a water bottle, and it was too far to walk to go get a coffee. So, but I really enjoyed it, and we had a couple days off, one a day ahead of time, and then one the day after I finished my last seminar, where my wife and I got to just go off and do some hiking along the coast. We really enjoy that, just hiking along.
And what island were you on?
Kauai. Kauai is very undeveloped, mostly agriculture, a lot of ranches, cattle ranching there, and a gigantic coffee plantation, which I've been to twice because I am an appreciator of coffee, which this is a double espresso here.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Hawaii. Every time I've been there 3 times, I think. Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Not a fan of the 5-hour time difference though, or the 11 hours sitting in an airplane seat to get there or get back.
Yeah, I'll be experiencing a little bit of that. I'm in Japan in a month. And
no, that's even worse. That's even a longer flight.
Hawaii is like, well, I guess it's not halfway, just the way everything works.
Yeah.
But those are. When you get a 5-hour flight or 5 hours of flying just to get to Vancouver, and then you have another 11 and a half or whatever from there.
No. Oh, I'm so thankful I'm not doing that. I have flown to China a few times from Winnipeg, but not recently. And that's, that's torture, actually. I find it torture to sit in a chair for that long. And you can't, you can get up a little bit, but.
Yeah, we, the Thailand one, I did the Vancouver to Singapore which was 16 and a half hours in the air.
Oh man,
And that was not fun. That's like it's the length of like 2 nights, because they literally have the lights off
yeah,
from the point you leave Vancouver at like 10 and you land in the morning in Singapore. And so they just leave the lights off the whole time. So 16 and a half hours. Thankfully it was a nice plane. But
I think I'm having a hard time thinking whether I prefer to be hung upside down by my big toes for 16 hours or sit on an airplane seat, and it's just a toss up.
Well, with the airplane, you at least get people bringing you coffee.
That's true.
It's not good coffee, but it's coffee.
It's hard. Yeah, it's hard to drink coffee hanging upside down by my big toes, so I'll grant you that is an advantage.
All right. Well, let's get into it a little bit. You wrote an article. You wrote an article this past week. How long have you been sitting on this? Because it's been a little bit since your dad passed, but I'm sure this is over a year. For a bit.
Yeah, it's over a year. And of all the things, like I left home at the age of 19, and I worked as a farm hand on my dad's farm, starting, I don't know, I guess around age 12 or 13, full time. Like around age 12 or 13, you're kind of expected to start doing a man's work, at least maybe not in lifting capabilities for pure muscle strength, but as far as driving tractors and stuff. So, and I've been, of all of those years, I could barely remember anything Dad said to me, except this one thing. And this one thing is the thing that if I think of Dad, it is what I think of now. It was one sentence long, and he simply said, "It went so fast, and now it's too late." And he was referring to how fast his life went, and the too late was referring to his 3 main regrets that he expressed in his final days as he was in the care home, preparing to die at the age of 92. So, I've been sitting on it for about a year, thinking I got to write about this. But how do I write about it in a way that conveys the importance and the impact of what he said? And so I finally got it written while I was in Hawaii, because I did have some free time after the seminars, and wrote it, and then I sent it off to another person to review it, ideas, input, that sort of thing. And I got it back, pushed it up last night, and there it is. The 3 major regrets of Dad's life. It stated in the it's to appreciate how fast his life seemed to have gone by. About a year or 2 before he died, he was over at my place, and we were splitting wood together. He was about 90 at the time, so he didn't actually split the wood. He just picked it up and put it in the pile. But he was telling me, it was in the fall, I guess, and he says, this summer went so fast, I couldn't believe the trees had time to get their leaves out before it was time to drop them. Like, it just seemed like a few days, a whole summer. And at the end, his 92 years, he was just astounded at how brief they'd been, how fast they'd gone. And that's something to pay attention to. So part of why I wrote this article, or I think a big reason, not the main reason, but a major reason, is that we often look at people on their deathbed, and if they're anything like me, I've never really relished the thought of going to see someone who's they're dying, they're in their deathbed, their final days of life. Never really relished that thought, but I have, because of relatives and friends dying, I have had to do that recently over the last, say, 6 years or so. And I have found it's well worth the trip. It is well worth sitting by a person dying to listen to what they say. And the second thing that comes up to mind is that let's say when Christopher Hitchens was dying, and he wanted to he was a world famous atheist, one of the so-called 4 atheists of the apocalypse, or whatever they were called, the four horsemen of atheism. He said, just in case, because he was referring to some other atheists who in their final days decided that maybe there is a God and maybe there is an afterlife and maybe I need to start thinking about this. So he wanted to preempt that. And his approach was to, for other people who had done that, to say, oh, they were old, they were kind of half out of their minds, don't pay attention. They were just saying that, whatever. So he says, if I start talking that way, just know that it must be the drugs or the medication, or maybe I'm actually losing my mind. So he warned people ahead of time in case he started talking that way. And so what he was promoting is the idea that, there was another famous atheist. I don't want to say his name because I think I know his name, but it might be the wrong one. And I don't want to accuse some other atheist of having become a theist in his last days. He was a famous opponent of intelligent design, famous, but in the last days actually decided, I think this is true. So he was referring to him specifically, but there's this idea that a person that as they are nearing death, they're not thinking straight anymore. So don't listen to them. Don't listen to what they say, or don't take it seriously. But I've sat by the deathbeds of a few people now, and sometimes you see there's no more plans to make, no more ambitions to fulfill. They got nothing on their schedule except the next thing is die. And they can now look back at their life free of all the daily distractions that prevented them from thinking about serious stuff, and maybe more objectively evaluate their lives. And that's why I think it's well worth listening to people who are approaching death, to hear what they have to say. And I don't want to be in that same position, and as some of them have been. I actually don't want to find myself in the position of saying what my dad said. It happened so fast and now it's too late. So, I greatly value what he said. And then I think, what were his three main regrets? And that's what I think we need to maybe explore a little bit, see how that applies to our lives.
Yeah, I didn't have the chance to be with my dad when he still had a lot of brain power left. By the time we got to the hospital, he's already in that space where the kidneys had been shutting down and stuff, and so he was pretty confused. But so let's just go right through this. So first regret. I'll just read this. In tears, Dad said, "I wish I had treated my wife better."
Yeah. Well, and that's something that I think, even if you're not married yet, even if you're relatively young, you need to be thinking about what Dad said. And just to put some context or maybe a larger picture on this, I read a book by a couple who were marriage counselors, and they had counseled, I think it was between 1,300 and 1,500 married couples. And in that book, there was a chapter that was titled, "What Women Want." And I know that there's lots of jokes been told about how men are clueless about what women want. And actually, there's probably a lot of truth about how clueless men are about what their wives really want. So I really
my wife would vote. My wife would vote affirmative to that, I think.
I know. And this was a very valuable chapter. So I read that chapter intently, and it was very simple, he said. They expressed it maybe in a variety of ways, but it all boiled down to just the one thing above all others that women wanted. He's talking women wanted of their man, of their husband. And that was this, that their husband would cherish them. And that's the word he used, cherish your wife. And then the rest of the chapter, he kind of expanded on what it means to cherish your wife. So Dad, he was he couldn't believe how fast the years had gone with his marriage. Like my mom had died just, I think about 8 or 10 months earlier. She passed away right on their 69th wedding anniversary to that very day. And it was kind of surreal to look at the wedding pictures that they had taken on that very, very happy day back in 1953. And see mom getting ready with her with her wedding gown and the bridesmaids, and dad with his suit and everything. And it's such a happy day. And those two were really in love back then. After it was dad that died, they came upon some old love letters or old letters they'd written. Basically, mom had written to dad, and I guess dad had kept them all these years. 69 years, my sisters. And one or two of my sisters are noted for their curiosity. And, we figured, well, they're gone now, so let's read them. And so it was really interesting to read mom's letters to dad. And I think as we read those letters, our respect and our appreciation for dad and mom greatly grew. I guess it gave us a glimpse that they were once young too. And, as kids growing up, you think your parents are just, and in the teen years, like they're stone age, and, there's all sorts of adjectives you could come up to describe your parents. But the idea that they were once young and in love, oh man, never crosses your mind when you're young, never crosses your mind. But if you knew that, I think you would have a lot more respect for your parents and a lot more appreciation for what they had to say to me and to my siblings, as we figured, you see some pretty girl walk across. I remember one time I was at a wedding and I saw a pretty girl walk across the reception floor, and I said to somebody, "Oh, I'm in love." That's ridiculous. That's ridiculous. It was so just momentary infatuation. So within that context, I would say dad and mom, I remember when I was young, they had a romantic relationship for, I would say, roughly the first 10 years of marriage. Like I remember dad chasing mom around the house and protests coming from another room where us kids weren't, Dad, Barry, the kids are here, that kind of stuff. So they were running around just happy. And I would say that was about 10 years, but dad got more and more involved. He was working was his primary virtue. What he saw as the ultimate virtue was working hard. So he was out from dawn till dusk, 6 days a week, chores on Sunday. Then he got involved in meetings and committees. And they reached a point some time after those first 10 years where it was mainly just a working relationship between dad and mom, because dad's so busy, he has hardly any time. And then it was pretty obvious that they reached a point where he no longer cherished his wife. He no longer cherished her. And then the last days of his life came. First of all, she died a year, 10 months earlier, 8. And the last few months of his life, I remember sitting with dad in his room at the care home, and we were talking about his past. And I asked him when they started dating, and he told me different things. He remembered it all, just in detail. But the thing that moved him to tears, and he began to cry, was she was gone now. And he realized how massively short he had fallen of loving and cherishing his wife. And it's often the case. You don't really appreciate a person till they're gone. And that was the case with dad, that he allowed work, his vocation, and committees and meetings and organizations he was part of to choke out putting his wife as the joy of his life. I think that's part of what it means to cherish your your wife is to center your life around her, to do things together. I find in my own life doing things together with my wife, even if I don't know, sometimes there's something we need to, there's some job outside. And Patty says, could you help me with this? And I find such joy in just working with her. I think this is fun. I'm doing something with my wife and we're working together out there. Or going hiking. Projects. Yeah. It could be a project, but you're literally in the same room working on this together. And now there's something that I have learned. A couple of things there, two major things. About mid part of my life, I began to realize that when we were working on projects together, that, or she would ask me, Kirk, what do you think of? And she'd give me 3 options. And I would decide, okay, this option over here, I think that's the best one. And it might not be the same option she thought was the best one. And then I would get into an argument. First of all, I would say why her option was subpar and why my option was the best. And then there would be...
How'd that work out for you, Kirk?
Sheldon, I feel terrible to this day. And I did it a lot. I feel terrible, but it never worked out. It never worked out. And usually what I would say is, oh, you just decide, what you want best. But it wasn't done with an attitude of cherishing my wife. And I realized eventually that she wanted me to be involved in her decisions because it's the experience of being involved together in this decision. But I learned, and it struck me one day, I was away somewhere on a trip, but she was back home. And I was thinking, and I was thinking about these arguments we would have on where I always tried to make her think the same way as me. And then a horrible thought occurred to me. I'm trying to make her to be another Kirk Durston. And that was a horrifying thought. The last thing, and I'm dead serious on this, the last thing I would want is to be married to another Kirk Durston. I wanted to be married to that Patty J that I married. That's the girl I wanted to be married to. And for quite a lengthy time now, I've been trying to make her like me. And when I realized that, I decided that never again would I try and do that. And furthermore, I would encourage, I don't know what you call it, her Patty J-ness. J is her middle name, but I often call her Patty J. I would encourage her Pattiness, her real personness. I want that to blossom and grow. I want that to be the person. I want her, the way she really is, and the way she wants to be, and the way she naturally is, or as she lives this life. I want that to be the person I'm married to. So that was huge lesson number 1. But Dad never realized that, and he went way beyond what I did with my wife. And that is what just moved him to tears in the end. That the woman that he had married, and one day we're sitting by his bed and we were talking about my mom. Her name was Patricia. He always called her Pat. The way my mom was when they were courting and when they were first married. So we talked a lot about that. And then what he had, how he had behaved toward her, especially in the latter years, not in the latter days. That was different, but in, let's say, the last half of their married years together. And he was appalled. He couldn't even talk. He was weeping so bad over how he treated his wife or not treated her. Because it's not just treating, he fell short, way short of cherishing his wife.
Well, let's get into the second one. His second great regret, which he also wept about, was, I wish I had done more for you kids.
Yeah. And there again, he couldn't even finish the sentence without
How many kids, how many siblings do you have?
I had 4 sisters. I was the oldest, and then I had 4 sisters. One died, I don't know, must be like 15, 18 years ago. And she died, I think she died on Dad's birthday, which was another. It's interesting how his daughter died on his birthday and his wife died on their anniversary. That is interesting. It hits hard, extra hard when that happens. But yeah, and so in the moment, we tried to reassure Dad, oh, Dad, like, don't worry about it. We all turned out fine and stuff, but we knew. In fact, I looked at my dad when I was raising my own children, even before I had kids, and I decided there's lessons that can be learned from your dad. They're not lessons of here's good stuff you should do, but they're lessons of here's what you should not do. And I cringe on my own, what my kids have learned what not to do, when they think of me. But I tried to be a better dad to my kids, but I don't ever remember Dad spending time with his daughters, except for the youngest one, because we all grew up and left home, and she was the last one at home. And I think then Dad and her had maybe a more special relationship because she was the last one, she was the youngest one, and she would, go out and be with Dad sometimes out in the barnyard or whatever. But and with me, Dad was he really loved stamp collecting. He'd collected stamps when he was a kid. And so I had a little scribbler and a little notebook, and I started a little stamp collection with Dad, on a Sunday afternoon. And I would say maybe a couple of times a year, maybe a total of half a dozen times over my whole growing up years, we would work on this little stamp collection together. And then about 3 more times we went on a hike together. But that about sums it up for my 19 years at home. Now, you would think working on the farm with Dad that I would have spent a lot of time with him, and we did, but it was all work. There was never, Dad regarded conversation as slacking off. Like, so you don't talk about anything other than what needs to be talked about for this particular job here. And the other interesting thing about Dad is he had the philosophy that you don't ever compliment anyone for a job well done because they'll slack off. Instead, you should find something that they could have done better at. They could have improved. So let's say I was working somewhere for the day doing a job that Dad had given me, and he came at the end of the day and he looked at what I'd done. I don't ever remember Dad complimenting me for anything in the entire course of my growing up years, but the criticism was endless, just on and on. And it was the major reason that I decided at the age of 19, I need a life. I need to get out of here. Like, this is old. I left on good terms. I never really reacted to Dad's criticism, except once or twice when we were working with cattle. And if you ever worked with cattle, they don't always behave and do what they're supposed to, and tempers can get very short. And I remember once Dad yelled at me for something that was totally not my fault. It's some cow that's lost its mind, but you got to yell at another human. Doesn't do any good to yell at a cow. So I got yelled at, and I just yelled at him right back because I'd had enough of that. But that was about the only time I ever, just yelled right back at him. And I think he knew this was just a pointless exercise. So he never spent any time. And one of the things I started doing with my own kids that I realized I have to do, there was 2 things. And part of the idea of discussion here is what can we learn from this? 2 things. Number one is that I decided when I come home at the end of the day of work that I will spend from that point till bedtime with my children. So my wife had them all day because Patty was a stay-at-home mom, and she really believed that was important. And by the end of the day, she's ready for me to come home and take over. So I played with them. I played like I'm on the floor playing with my kids, building blocks and, I don't know, driving trucks into Lego towers and whatever it was. I had 4 boys and 2 girls. And so I played with them at the end of the day. And I am so glad that I did that. I am so glad. It's just being with your kids, they see how an adult behaves and it just kind of rubs off on them. The other thing that I decided to do, and this is where I have a major regret. My number one regret in raising my children is that I'd wished I'd spent more one-on-one time with them. One-on-one time. But we did start on a Saturday. I'd start slotting them in. Okay, this hour I'm spending with you, and then the next hour we're spending this. And think of something you'd like to do with me, I'd say to the kids. What would you like to do? And so you'd get eventually a list of possible fun things to do with your kids, and one-on-one time. And now I don't want to portray myself as if I was amazing at that, because I was not, and that's why I have regrets. A lot of Saturdays got crowded out because we have to go somewhere or something happens or some kid's away or whatever. And that's my number one regret, is I'd wished I'd spent more one-on-one time with my children. And so big take-home lesson there. In the teen years, it was a little different. I remember one time I took my youngest daughter out to a play in Stratford. We went out for dinner and then a play, and things were a little strange. She was our strongest willed kid, and she was now in high school, and there had been some headbutting, quite a bit of it actually. And the trick was for my wife and I as parents, how do we kind of like navigate her through the high school years here? And it is hair pulling out stuff sometimes. So I would say a major turning point in my relationship with her came that evening. I took her out for dinner and then to a play. And I don't know what she was thinking. She was probably thinking, okay, Dad's taking me out for dinner and he's gonna, at me for 2 hours straight and whatever. No, it was none of that. The whole point was just to take her out for dinner and give her a good time. We went to play. It was some Shakespearean play, and I can't remember what the name was now or which one it was, but because we've seen a lot in Stratford, but it was funny. There were some hilarious parts in it, and we were both laughing together in that play. And so in the later years, I wanted to do something with the kids and maybe not as frequent, but something special with each one. And again, those were the best times with my kids, but I deeply regret not doing more of them.
I'd say the same thing. Like, as my kids are now starting to leave the home, it becomes more and more important that every time they come back, okay, there's a chance to connect. Because my oldest will come in, it's like a whirlwind. She's got a boyfriend, so she comes to town. She wants to spend it with a boyfriend. She doesn't want to spend it with me, but it's just making sure there's those few minutes at least where I'm there for her.
Yeah, it's the in and out. And the older I've gotten now, the more important I see relationships are, the more I value relationships. And now for family times, we'll get in the truck and drive for 5 hours to my youngest daughter's place. She doesn't live the furthest away, but we have two other kids that live in Golden, BC, which is a plane flight away. But we make a point at least once a year to book a flight and go out there and spend a number of days or a week, and never regret that. I will never regret that. And I will never regret all the flights I made to see Dad and Mom in their final months or final 2 years of life. I knew they're going to be gone soon. And so I started making several flights a year out there to Edmonton, which would be about, I don't know, probably a 4-hour flight or 4.5 from here. I forget.
Yeah, probably five from there.
Yeah.
Let's get into the third regret.
Yeah. That was number one for Dad. Now, that was what happened is that all the stuff Dad had ever been involved in his life, his vocation, all committees and stuff, they reached a point he didn't even mention that anymore. That was completely, utterly of no relevance to him anymore. He was not interested in those things, not even his farm. He would talk about that in his elder years, but there reached a point where he's coming in the home stretch here where, he's not interested in that anymore. It was just the three regrets. But the biggest regret of all was the third one, and that began to grow larger and larger as his life now went from months to maybe a few weeks and then days. That was the number one regret, and it was this. It just consumed him. It became the thing, and that was he wished, it's hard to put it into words, so I'll have to give you some background here, but he wished that he deeply regretted that he hadn't lived his life more for God in eternity. Now, I don't want to convey the idea here that Dad was a right party animal, all that kind of stuff. No. One of my fondest memories of Dad when it comes to spiritual things is that he taught a boys' Sunday school class for years. And this, I can't remember the age exactly. It would be roughly maybe 11, 12, 13, somewhere in there. For years, most of my growing up life, it seemed at least. But okay, it's one thing for somebody to teach a Sunday school class. It's another thing for a member of his family who lives with him and sees him prepare to see how seriously he takes that. And he took it very seriously. So every Saturday night, he would quit work early. He would go into his office and he would be diligently preparing to teach that boys' Sunday school class. Now, keep in mind, they're 11 or 10 or 12 years old. He could have wung it just out of his back pocket, probably, but he never did. He diligently and faithfully prepared to teaching that class. And I thought, wow, and the years that followed from that. And I reminded them that last days, Dad, you remember there that you did do one or two things. And then his responsibilities in the church. We had a country church, so everybody would take turns lighting the furnace on Sunday morning. And there'd be the mornings where it's 35 below. And there's been no heat in that building all week. And it's cold. And so we would have to get up early, do the chores. Well, no, we'd go to the church, get it all shipshape for church, get that furnace going, and then go home and feed 200 head of cattle and then get ready for church. And Dad faithfully took his responsibilities seriously. I never recounted or recollected Dad just winging it or doing a sloppy job of it. He always did his best in regards to helping out in his local church, teaching that boys' Sunday school class. And then one time I took him on a project to another country where we just set up with a team of people. We would just go to some village, set up a projector in the middle of a dirt street, and you get hundreds of people showing up. But Dad, during that time, learned how to share his faith with other people. Well, he was sharing with everybody that he could. On the way home, to the taxi driver, to the people on the Greyhound bus beside him, everybody. And I could see that Dad had a genuine desire to really serve God, but it only opened up in those two main windows, his service to his Sunday school class and his church and these boys. Now, okay, if you were to look at Dad and say, well, what's he regretting? He did as much or more than a lot of Christian men that I know. That's not the issue here. The issue is not what you did in the course of your life. The issue is, what did God want you to do that you did not do? And we did have some conversations, my mom and sisters and I, that in the latter years, we felt that Dad had maybe gone into farming when really he shouldn't have. He was probably felt an obligation to his father to farm. And I don't know what Dad's thoughts were, but in the end, his greatest regret of all was that he felt that he'd fallen far short of putting God at the center of his life, serving God in the course of his life, and just living his life for God, despite the fact that other people would say, oh, he's religious and he talks about God and stuff. And that is my number one concern as well in my own life. I already know. In fact, I used to think when I was, say, 20 and young and naive, I used to think that I had maybe one or two issues, or one or two things that I need to really strengthen. And then if I get those two issues really up to snuff, then I'll be a solid, mature Christian. And then maybe 10 years pass by or less, and I think, oh, well, actually, there's more than just one or two. There may be 5 or 6 areas in my life that I don't think are actually optimal yet. So, and then more years went by, and I realized I fall short in every area of my life. It's not just staying away from doing bad stuff. That's not the Christian. Well, that's a good thing to not do. Don't do the bad stuff. But what dismayed me was how far short I fell in everything. And I need divine intervention. It's like somebody who maybe has a disability and can't walk, and they need help all the time to walk. I reached the point where I realized I need help all the time from God to live as he desires me to live all the time. So when Dad was reaching his final days of life, and we're talking days, not weeks or months, but days. This really, I guess he saw, and this is why it's important to spend time with people who are dying, because they're going to see from a perspective that you and I don't have. We still got all the distractions we're involved in, all our schedules and all this kind of stuff. They don't have any of that. And they can now see things as they really are. And that's a phrase taken out from C.S. Lewis, Pilgrim's Regress, as they really are. And that became, he was, in fact, the last time I went to visit him, I walked into the ward in the hospital because he had fallen and broken 3 ribs, 1 arm, and a collarbone. And this time he wasn't going to make it. That wasn't going to heal. And the charge nurse, or the head nurse, as I walked into the ward, she said, "There's something really bothering your dad here. He just won't let go of life. There's something he needs to deal with." And I knew his regrets told it all. So I walked into that room, and I had said this before, but now it really carried weight. I said, "Dad, there's only one thing left to do now, and that is prepare to meet God. And so why don't we just have a prayer? All the things that you've regretted, all the areas you've fallen short in over the course of your life, and the things that you've done that you wished you hadn't done, or whatever, you didn't cherish your wife, whatever that may be. Let's have a prayer time now, and let's confess. Would you like to?" Like I didn't say, "Let's do this." I didn't want to lead him. I asked him, "Would you like to do this?" To confess everything, like anything that might be between you and God, and how you used your life, because it was all spent now. And he realized, whoa, I didn't spend it the way I should have, and it's too late now to do anything. So he nodded his head. He could barely speak by that point. There's something wrong with his throat. He nodded his head. He really wanted to do that. And so Dad and I prayed. I would have to say, and this is sad in one way, but it's nice in another, the best time I ever had with my dad was in those final days. Best time. Because there was no facade anymore. There was no, "Oh, let's get to work," or no criticism for a job you could have done even better than the way you did it. None of that. It was just real. Dad was real now. He was real about his desperate desire to prepare to meet God. And we had a great prayer of confession. But the funny thing, it's not funny, it was amazing. When I prayed with Dad, he was in constant pain all the time. You could see his face there was this tension and strain they were giving him drugs to dull it, but there was this pain. When I prayed with Dad, that just completely melted away. I never saw Dad so peaceful and so utterly content. And I read him the 23rd Psalm. I prayed with him, and there was a nurse happened to see this because they wanted to do I don't know, a bad change position for Dad or whatever. And I says, "Okay, just let me pray with Dad now. Just let me finish here." And so she stayed in the room, and she saw this, and she said, "This is amazing." She was just amazed at how this prayer affected Dad, and how he just utterly was almost in blissful peace, even despite all his broken bones. So I left him the last time. I spent a few days there, and I left him at the end. But I had a deep, deep piece that I'll be seeing Dad again. He's ready now. He's ready for when he passes into the valley of the shadow of death. Jesus will meet him. And I said, Dad, 5 seconds after you died, you will see something more amazing and more better than anything you've ever seen in your entire life. And I don't know how time works in eternity, but I don't think it's going to be sitting around for years waiting for us kids to show up. I said, Dad, you'll hardly have time to get there, and we'll be right behind you and your grandkids. And it's just, So he was ready. He was ready finally to let go of life. He was right with the God. And I came home and I began to think about what he'd said and how this should apply to my life. And I really wanted to write this article so that more people would maybe be affected. It'd be my dad's last message to everybody who read the article.
Well, I really enjoyed the article. Your dad and my dad passed around the same time, and I wish I could have had these conversations with him, but the last few years of his life, he was in and out of the hospital, and he just didn't have the ability to really have good conversations those last probably 5 years. And so it was tough, but as I read the article, I just saw, okay, there's some really amazing stuff here. And my wife and I just attended a funeral last week, and as we get older, the funerals come more often.
Lots of them.
And it makes you evaluate your own life a lot. And so it's thanks for writing that article. Those of you watching, go check out kirkdurston.com. Take a look at the article, comment. Make sure you hit the bell and share it with others, and and let us know if you have any questions and what your relationships with your parents were like, and that kind of thing. So thanks, Kirk. Is there anything else you wanted to close on?
Well, if you read that article, and I know that most of the people listen to this discussion after the live stream, because I see the analytics. So if you're amongst those who read the article and you feel that you really want to talk to somebody about this, there's a link at the bottom of my article where you can talk to someone. It's not me, but you will talk to a real live person anonymously and confidentially. And you too can, if you feel you're not ready to meet God yet, click that link.
Yeah. If you're watching this going, okay, why are people on their deathbed thinking about this kind of stuff? Well, there's a reason. And so, we'd love to talk to you about that. And feel free to leave a comment too if you're wanting to do that. I have to run. I've got another thing
me too.
The hour, so do you. But good conversation. I did have a question that came up when your dad saw his time on the earth as this man that happened so fast. Yeah,
like a couple of minutes.
How does the science behind that work? And you don't have to answer this today, but is there anything to the fact that as you get older, an hour in your life is actually shrinking based on how you see life? Like as I get older, it's like, what happened to a year?
Yeah. I've thought a lot about that, and I'll be writing an article on that, and maybe we can have a live stream discussion on that. But I've thought a lot about that, and there's two major theories, and I'm going to address both of them in there. And I don't think one theory works, but the other one does.
Sounds good. Looking forward to that. All right. We'll see all of you. I think we're around next week, right?
Yep. Who knows what we're talking about next week? I mean, stuff's so many things.
If you've got content you'd like for us to talk about, if you want us to react to something, you want us to engage on a certain topic, let us know. We're always looking.
Just leave a comment underneath here, and maybe we'll be able to talk about that.
I do know that there's more asteroids in the air around us, so maybe we'll have a conversation about.
There's one that might hit Earth in December of 2032.
Yep.
something to look forward to.
All right. Sounds good. Talk to you later.
Okay, bye for now.